All right, so you're here, which means you're one of us. You want to cut through all the noise and get straight to what really matters. I know you want to understand what's actually going on in the world, and maybe, just maybe, have a couple of those aha moments along the way, right? Well, consider this deep dive your shortcut to understanding a pretty crucial issue that's unfolding right now.
Absolutely. Buckle up because today we're diving headfirst into something that honestly feels a bit like science fiction, but it's 100% real. We're talking about the cyber attack capabilities of artificial intelligence and how rapidly they're developing.
We're not just speculating here either. We're basing this exploration on some seriously cutting-edge research from Google DeepMind, the folks pushing the boundaries of AI.
Yeah, the real deal.
Exactly. And they put together this paper. It's called A Framework for Evaluating Emerging Cyber Attack Capabilities of AI. And what really blew me away was they analyzed over 12,000 real-world attempts to use AI in cyber attacks.
Wow. 12,000, that's a massive amount of data.
It really is.
Real-world data, too.
Real-world stuff. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really pull out the crucial insights from this research, specifically for you. We want to give you a crystal clear picture of what AI can do right now when it comes to cyber attacks, but also what it might be capable of in the future, and, maybe most importantly, how you need to be thinking about protecting yourself, your data, and your organizations.
Because, let's be honest, AI has been this, force for good in cybersecurity for a while now, right? It's helped us detect threats and bolster our defenses.
Totally.
But now it's starting to show this other side, this potential for being used by the bad guys, offering new and inventive ways for attackers to do their thing.
It's like a double-edged sword, this AI.
Yeah, exactly. It's that duality we have to understand.
Yeah.
And this DeepMind paper, it really hones in on 3 key areas where AI is introducing these new risks. The first one they call capability uplift, which basically means AI could give more people the skills to launch these really sophisticated, complicated attacks. Then there's throughput uplift, which suggests that attacks could become much faster and they could reach a much wider scale.
Oh, wow.
And then the last one, they highlight these novel risks from autonomous systems, basically saying this could lead to totally new kinds of attacks that we haven't even seen before.
Okay, to understand this better, I think we need to get our bearings a bit. The paper keeps talking about something called the cyberattack chain. Can you break that down for us?
Of course. So think of the cyberattack chain, which the paper pulls from Lockheed Martin, by the way. Think of it as the blueprint of a typical cyber attack. It's like a recipe,
Okay.
but for disaster. And it breaks down the entire attack into 7 key stages. And it all starts with reconnaissance. This is basically the attacker doing their homework. They're gathering information about their target. Who are they? What systems do they use? What are their weaknesses?
Right, intel gathering.
Exactly. They're gathering intel. Then comes weaponization, where they create or obtain the tools they'll use to actually carry out the attack. So think malware, a malicious script, an exploit kit, that sort of thing. Then there's delivery, which is how they actually get that weapon to their target. This could be anything from a phishing email to a compromised website to a USB drive dropped in a parking lot.
So many ways.
So many ways, right? Then we have exploitation. This is the moment of truth where the weapon does its job. It could be tricking someone into clicking a malicious link or exploiting a vulnerability in a system to gain access.
Like that vulnerability that hasn't been discovered yet.
A 0 day.
A 0 day, yeah.
Exactly, a 0 day. So then we have installation. This is where the attacker establishes a more permanent foothold in the system. They might install a backdoor, some malware that lets them come and go as they please.
Ah, sneak.
Very sneaky. After that, there's command and control, or C2. This is the attacker setting up a secret channel to communicate with the compromised system, to issue commands, steal data, and basically control it remotely.
So it's like a secret back channel.
Precisely. It's their lifeline. And then finally, we reach the last stage, actions on objectives. This is the attacker's ultimate goal. It could be stealing sensitive data, disrupting operations with ransomware, launching a denial of service attack to take down a website, or really anything they set out to do.
So the cyber attack chain, it's like a playbook for the bad guys.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily for us, it's also a roadmap for the good guys.
Oh, how so?
Well, by understanding these stages, security teams can communicate much more effectively when they're analyzing threats or responding to an actual attack. It gives gives them a common language and a framework to work with. More importantly, it lets them think strategically about where they can best intervene to stop an attack in progress, or even better, strengthen their defenses proactively at different points along that chain.
So I guess understanding the attacker's playbook is the first step to beating them at their own game.
You got it.
Now, the paper also mentions another term that you might have heard of if you follow cybersecurity at all, the IDARI AATT&CK framework.
Huh?
How does that fit in with this whole cyber attack chain idea?
Okay, so think of the cyber attack chain as that high-level overview, those 7 main acts in the attacker's play. The MITRE ATT&CK framework, on the other hand, provides this amazingly detailed breakdown of all the specific tactics and techniques that attackers might use within each of those acts.
Oh, okay.
It's like having this massive encyclopedia of every sneaky move a cyber adversary could make.
Wow.
So the chain gives you the what of an attack's progression. ATT&CK gives you the very specific how.
So the chain is the structure, and ATT&CK is like all the details filled in.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this framework for understanding how cyber attacks typically unfold, but how do we even begin to figure out what AI is bringing to the table? How is it changing the game?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
The paper actually talks about how we currently evaluate AI in cybersecurity. What are some of the methods being used right now?
So researchers are trying a few different things to gauge AI's cyber capabilities. There are these CTF-style exercises. They're basically cybersecurity competitions, but for AI models. The AI tries to solve specific hacking challenges, like finding vulnerabilities in code or bypassing security measures.
So it's like AI versus AI, basically.
Or AI versus like a deliberately vulnerable system. You also have knowledge benchmarks, which test how well an AI understands cybersecurity concepts, think quizzes, questions, that sort of thing.
It's like a cybersecurity exam for AI.
Exactly, see if they've been studying. Then there are uplift studies. These look at how much AI can boost a human's ability to carry out a cyber attack. So can AI make a hacker more efficient or help them find vulnerabilities they wouldn't have spotted on their own? Then you have cyber range exercises. These are more complex simulations, like virtual mock-ups of real network environments. AI agents can roam around in this virtual world, trying to learn and adapt their attack strategies.
Whoa, so they can try out different attack scenarios in a safe environment.
Yeah, without causing any real damage. And lastly, there are forecasting studies, which are all about prediction. Trying to figure out how AI might change the threat landscape in the future. Like, will AI lead to more frequent attacks? Will it make certain types of attacks more costly or less costly?
It seems like they're really trying to cover all the bases here. But the paper also points out that these methods, while helpful, have some serious limitations, especially when it comes to figuring out how to actually defend against these AI-powered attacks in the real world.
That's a really important point. You see, while these evaluations can tell us if an AI model can, say, crack a password or find a vulnerability in a controlled setting, they don't necessarily give security teams practical guidance on where they should be focusing their resources to bolster their defenses.
Okay, so it's one thing for an AI to score high on a test, but it's another thing entirely to use that information to actually protect ourselves from real-world attacks.
It's exactly like just because an AI can ace a CTF challenge doesn't necessarily tell a company whether they need to upgrade their firewall or train their employees to spot phishing emails.
Right, the real world is way more complex.
Way more complex. And this brings us to what the paper calls the cost collapse argument.
Cost collapse. That sounds ominous.
It is kind of. The basic idea here is that the biggest danger of advanced AI and cyber attacks might not just be about entirely new, mind-blowing capabilities. It's about AI's potential to drastically lower the cost in terms of time, effort, specialized knowledge, and scalability of stages of the cyber attack chain that have always been really difficult and expensive for attackers to pull off. Especially attackers who don't have tons of resources.
So things that used to require like elite hacker skills and a lot of time could potentially become much easier and faster for a much wider range of attackers.
Exactly. Imagine discovering a new unknown vulnerability, a 0-day.
Oh, right, like we were talking about.
Yeah. That traditionally takes a huge amount of expertise, time, and resources. But what if AI can automate parts of that process? Then suddenly the cost of finding and exploiting a 0-day goes way down.
So AI could democratize these advanced hacking techniques.
In a way, yeah. It could make them accessible to more people, more groups, even those without nation-state level resources.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this cost collapse thing is a really big deal. But how do we actually measure these changes? How can we track how AI is impacting the cost of carrying out different attacks?
Well, the paper uses a really clever analogy here. They compare it to how we measure inflation in the economy.
Inflation.
Yeah. You see, economists track the price of a representative basket of everyday goods and services to see how much the overall cost of living is going up or down.
Right, like the price of bread, milk, eggs.
Exactly. So the researchers are suggesting we should track a similar basket of cyber goods, but instead of the price, we're tracking the cost for attackers to carry out different stages of an attack.
So by seeing how AI influences those costs over time, we can get a much clearer picture of not just if AI is making things easier for attackers, but where in the attack process and by how much.
Precisely. It gives us a much more granular understanding of the threat landscape and how it's evolving.
Okay, so we've got this idea of cost collapse and this analogy of a basket of cyber goods. But how do we actually put all of this into practice? This is where their four-stage evaluation framework comes in,
You
right?
got it. This framework gives us a structured, methodical way to actually translate the results of these AI evaluations into actionable insights that can directly help us build better defenses. And it has four main stages. They all work together.
Okay, let's break those stages down. The first one is curating a basket of representative attack chains. What exactly does that mean?
So remember that massive data set of over 12,000 real-world AI cyberattack attempts we talked about?
Yeah, from Google's threat intelligence group.
Right. The researchers started by analyzing that data to identify a collection of attack patterns that accurately reflect what's happening in the real world. They were looking at different attack methods, different types of targets, and the motives behind those attacks.
So they're basically creating a realistic sample of cyber attacks to use as a benchmark.
Exactly. They want to make sure that the AI evaluations they're doing are grounded in real-world data and reflect the actual threats we're facing.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, what's the second stage?
The second stage is called bottleneck analysis.
Bottleneck. So in this context, a bottleneck is any stage in the cyber attack chain where attackers typically run into significant difficulties.
Precisely. It's like a choke point.
Okay, so they analyze the costs for attackers at each of these bottlenecks, like how much time and effort it takes, how much specialized knowledge they need, and how easily they can scale up their attacks.
Right. And then they assess the potential for AI to significantly reduce those costs at those specific points.
So it's about figuring out where AI could potentially smooth out the rough patches for attackers, making it easier for them to get through those difficult stages.
Exactly. Understanding those bottlenecks is crucial for prioritizing our defensive efforts. We need to know where AI could have the most impact on the attack process.
That's logical.
All right, what's stage 3?
Stage 3 is all about devising targeted cybersecurity model evaluations.
Targeted. What do they mean by that?
So based on the bottlenecks they identified in the previous stage, they designed very specific evaluations tailored to measure an AI model's ability to reduce costs at those critical points in the attack chain.
So they're not just testing if an AI can do something, but how much easier and more efficient it makes that specific task for an attacker.
Exactly. They're looking at things like how much faster an AI can complete a task, how often it succeeds, and how much easier it makes it to scale up attacks. These are all crucial factors in understanding the real-world impact of AI on the attacker's toolkit. So instead of just asking, can the AI do this? They're asking, how much better does AI make an attacker at doing this?
Precisely. And that leads us to the final stage.
Stage 4 is all about actually putting these evaluations to the test and getting some quantifiable results, right?
Exactly. It's called evaluation execution and aggregated cost differential scores. They run all those targeted evaluations they designed in the previous stage, and then they bring all the results together. The goal is to come up with a cost differential score, which essentially quantifies the overall potential of an AI model to boost offensive cyber capabilities.
Okay, so it's a way to measure how much easier and more effective AI could potentially make cyber attacks.
Right. A higher score means the AI model is showing a greater potential to disrupt the offensive landscape.
Got it. So they've built this framework. They've got a way to measure things. Now, how did they actually put it to use? What did their evaluation benchmark look like, and what kind of results did they get?
Well, first, they had to choose which attack chains to focus on. They ended up selecting 7 that they felt were most representative of the current threat landscape and where AI could plausibly make a big difference. These included things like phishing attacks, malware, denial of service attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks, SQL injection, and even the notorious zero-day attacks.
Those are some of the biggest cybersecurity threats out there.
Exactly. And then they got to work designing specific challenges to test how AI could influence these different types of attacks.
So they're basically creating these little cyber battlefields to see how AI would perform.
In a way, yeah. And to make sure these challenges were truly testing the AI's abilities, they teamed up with external cybersecurity organizations to create 50 brand new challenges. And they designed these challenges based on fundamental cybersecurity principles. So they couldn't be easily gamed or solved by the AI models simply because they'd seen something similar in their training data.
Oh, so they had to think outside the box, like a real attacker would.
Precisely. They also categorized the challenges by difficulty, ranging from straw man challenges, which are the simplest, all the way up to hard challenges, which would really push the AI's limits.
So it's like they're giving the AI a graded exam, starting with the easy stuff and working their way up to the more complex problems.
Yeah, good analogy.
And what happened when they put this experimental AI model, Gemini 2.0 Flash, through its paces?
Well, the results were really interesting. Out of the 50 challenges, the AI managed to solve 12, which is about a 16% success rate overall.
Not exactly a stellar performance.
Well, it did really well on the easier challenges. It solved all of the straw man and most of the easy ones.
They've got the basics down.
Yeah, it's got potential. But as the difficulty ramped up, its performance dropped off pretty quickly. It only solved a handful of the medium challenges and none of the hard ones.
So it's not quite ready to take on the world's best hackers just yet.
No, not quite. The researchers concluded that at this stage, the model still lacks some of the more complex skills you need for real-world cyber operations. It can't yet independently carry out a complete end-to-end attack or even consistently help with those high-impact, really sophisticated attacks.
Well, that's somewhat reassuring, at least for now.
Yeah.
But the paper also dug a bit deeper into the results, right? They looked at how the AI performed on specific skills that are important at different stages in the attack chain. What did they learn from that?
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. They found that when it came to operational security skills, like being able to evade detection, hide its tracks, and adapt to changing security measures, the AI model actually showed a much higher success rate, around 40%, in fact.
Wow, so it's better at covering its tracks than it is at actually breaking in.
It seems that way.
That's a little unsettling.
It is something to be aware of, definitely. Their thinking is that these operational security tasks often don't require a long sequence of perfect actions to be successful. Even small improvements in things like stealth and adaptability can make a big difference.
Okay, so AI might not be a master hacker yet, but it's getting pretty good at being sneaky. What about other skills?
Well, when it came to actually exploiting vulnerabilities, the AI's success rate was pretty low, only around 6%.
So it's not so good at finding and taking advantage of weaknesses in systems.
Not yet. They found that the AI often relied on these generic attack strategies. It didn't seem to adapt well to the specific nuances of different vulnerabilities.
So it's like it's trying to use a one-size-fits-all approach, which doesn't really work in the complex world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like trying to use a hammer to fix everything. Sometimes you need a screwdriver or a wrench or even something more specialized. Then there was malware development, which had a moderate success rate at around 30%. And lastly, information gathering and reconnaissance, the initial stage of an attack, was also relatively low at around 11%. Although, interestingly enough, they're already seeing AI being used in the real world for reconnaissance activities.
Oh, really? So attackers are already using AI to scope out their targets.
It's starting to happen. Now, when it comes to those difficulty levels we talked about, the AI predictably struggled as the challenges got harder. It had a 50% success rate on the apprentice level, the easy challenges, but very limited success on those practitioner and expert levels.
So it can handle the basics, but it's not ready to go head-to-head with the big leagues.
Not yet. And the paper points to two main reasons for these limitations. First, the AI sometimes struggles to maintain accuracy and coherence over longer sequences of actions. Like, it might be able to do one or two things right, but it has trouble putting together a whole series of steps in a complex attack.
Right, like it's missing the big picture strategy.
Exactly. And second, it lacks what they call strategic reasoning. It has trouble coming up with creative, novel attack strategies when faced with a new or unexpected situation. It often falls back on generic approaches or gets stuck in these repetitive loops, trying the same thing over and over again, even though it's not working.
So it's not very good at improvising or thinking on its feet.
Not yet, no. But, that could change as AI technology continues to evolve.
That is a slightly terrifying thought.
Yeah.
But okay, we've spent a lot of time talking about how AI could be used to make cyber attacks easier and more effective. But the real question here is, what can we do about it? How can we actually use this information to improve our defenses?
That is the crucial question. And this is where the real value of this framework shines through. It helps us focus our efforts. By understanding which AI-enabled techniques are most likely to be used and which ones could have the biggest impact, organizations can make smarter decisions about where to invest their resources and how to prioritize their security efforts.
So instead of just reacting to every new threat that pops up, we can be more proactive and targeted in our approach.
Exactly.
Now, the paper talks about something called a threat coverage gap assessment. What is that?
It's all about identifying vulnerabilities in our defenses. By taking the results of these evaluations and mapping them onto the cyber attack chain, we can see where our current defenses might fall short against these AI-enhanced attacks. For example, the fact that the AI model was so much better at operational security skills, like evasion and stealth, suggests that we might need to really beef up our ability to detect those subtle activities.
Okay, so if AI is making it easier for attackers to hide once they're in our systems, we need to be much better at spotting those sneaky little traces they leave behind.
Exactly. And those traces could be anywhere along the attack chain. For example, in the installation phase, an AI could help attackers bury their malware deep within legitimate programs, or use techniques like sideloading to slip it in unnoticed. And in the command and control phase, they could use AI to encrypt their communications, hide their traffic in the noise of normal network activity, or even use stolen credentials to blend in and make it seem like their activity is legitimate.
So we're going to need much more sophisticated detection methods to keep up with these AI-powered attackers.
Definitely. And that brings us to another key takeaway from this framework, the importance of developing and deploying targeted mitigations. This means creating and refining security measures that are specifically designed to counter these emerging AI-powered threats.
They're not just relying on our old security tools, but developing new ones that are tailored to this new threat landscape.
Exactly. This could include things like making AI models themselves more resistant to misuse, or creating new AI-powered tools that can help us detect and respond to malicious AI activity.
So it's like an arms race, but with AI.
It is, in a way. The good news is that there are already some really promising developments in this area. For example, Google DeepMind has a whole framework for ensuring the safety and security of their AI systems, and they're constantly testing and improving their safeguards against these kinds of AI-driven attacks.
It sounds like we need to be constantly innovating and adapting to stay ahead of the curve. What about using AI to actually simulate attacks so we can test our defenses in a more realistic way? The paper talks about grounding AI-enabled adversary emulation.
Yes. This is where things get really interesting. Red teams, which are basically teams of ethical hackers who simulate attacks to find vulnerabilities in an organization's defenses, they can use this framework to create much more realistic models of how attackers might leverage AI.
Okay, so instead of just guessing what an AI attacker might do, they can base their simulations on actual demonstrated AI capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. They can combine their existing knowledge of attack tactics and techniques with the concrete evidence from these evaluations about how AI can impact the cost and effectiveness of different attack phases.
So it's like they're using the AI's own playbook against it.
In a way, yeah. It allows them to create much more challenging and relevant attack simulations, which can really put an organization's defenses to the test.
So it's like a sparring match,
Yeah.
helping us train and prepare for the real fight.
Hmm?
And lastly, the framework can also be used for benchmarking defenses, right?
Absolutely. This gives us a way to measure how effective our defenses actually are at increasing the cost and difficulty for attackers who are trying to use AI. We can see how much our security measures are slowing them down, how much more effort they have to put in, and how much risk they have to take on to achieve their goals.
So it's not just about building defenses, it's about measuring how well those defenses are actually working against these new AI-powered threats.
Exactly. It's about being data-driven and making sure that our security investments are actually paying off.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into this research from Google DeepMind. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. But for our listeners who are just joining us, what are the key takeaways we should all remember?
I think the most important message is that this framework gives us a much-needed way to systematically understand how AI is changing the landscape of cyber attacks across every stage of the attack process. It's not just about whether AI can hack, but about how it's fundamentally altering the dynamics of those attacks.
Right. It's about understanding the economics of cyberattacks and how AI is impacting those costs.
Exactly. And while current AI models might not be capable of launching those fully autonomous Hollywood-style cyber attacks just yet, this research highlights the potential for some pretty significant shifts, especially in areas like evading detection and maintaining a persistent presence within compromised systems.
So it's not just about preventing the initial breach, but also about detecting and mitigating those more subtle and persistent threats.
Right. And it's also about recognizing that AI could be used to amplify those more widespread attacks, like large-scale reconnaissance efforts or attempts to exploit vulnerabilities across a wide range of systems.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. But the good news is that research like this is giving us the tools and the understanding we need to start building those more effective defenses.
And this framework is designed to evolve as AI technology continues to advance, right?
Absolutely. As AI capabilities grow, so will the challenges it poses. But this framework can be updated and refined to keep pace with those changes, ensuring that we're always one step ahead. It really highlights the need for close collaboration between AI developers and the cybersecurity community. We need to work together to understand the risks, anticipate the challenges, and continuously adapt our strategies to stay ahead of those threats.
It's like a constant game of cat and mouse, but with incredibly high stakes.
You could say that.
Well, for our listeners who've joined us on this journey, I think it's clear that AI is going to play an increasingly important role in the world of cybersecurity, both for the good guys and the bad guys. But the good news is, research like this is equipping us with the knowledge and the tools we need to navigate this new reality.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a final thought for you to ponder. As AI continues to evolve, and as its ability to lower the cost and complexity of sophisticated attacks grows, what new security measures are you, as an individual or your organization, going to need to prioritize? It's time to start thinking beyond those traditional approaches and consider the broader implications of AI for your digital security.
It's definitely a question worth pondering. And if you're interested in exploring this topic further, we highly recommend checking out the full research paper that we've been discussing. It's packed with valuable insights and really gives you a glimpse into the future of cybersecurity in this age of advanced AI. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great discussion.